Okay, so today I'm going to be demonstrating how I design and plan for my garden every year. It's the easiest to plan when you have not had a garden in previous years, but I go a little bit analytical with my planning. I try not to plant the same things in the same spots every year continuously as to prevent the chance of disease um, and nitrogen or nutrient depletion. So when you make these, it's nice to either have them as a digital copy, like you can do this exact thing that I'm doing on Excel. It just takes a little bit more time, depending on how good you are at Excel. Um, but beyond that, I like to do it on paper, save the paper, and then I can look back and see what was planted, what was where, and then reflect on how it did based on my own memory. But it's nice to keep a journal as well, because sometimes your memory, you'll forget a lot of the little things, and you'll also, you'll understand how this plant or variety acted when there was high winds, or there was drought, or high heat, or it got kind of cold towards the end of the season. All that's accounted for. So, but this is just to get people started, keep them organized, and have a more productive growing season. What I like to do first is I get some regular sheet paper or graph paper. It's nothing special, just some, filler paper that I got from the grocery store a few years ago. And after that, like I said, I like to have my previous year's garden plan. If you don't have that, that's okay. You can kind of just base it off of memory, or you can just plant what you want to plant. It doesn't matter. It's your garden. I also like to have pens and a few pencils, a pencil sharpener, and then depending on the person, you can either use marker or colored pencils to color coordinate varieties or different types of vegetables in the plot, so you're not having to look back and say, oh, what is what, and like look at all these like little small chicken scratch. I personally just like to abbreviate, but some people like to have colored pencils. For me, I get too many varieties in a single area, and greens start blending together, and it's not super helpful. But beyond that, what you want to do first is you want to measure the area of your growing space. I just kind of, or not the area, but the perimeter. So I like to do rough estimates with a tape measure and kind of just figure that out. And then from there, I will go in here and I'll draw it visually, like an aerial view on the map. And each quadrant or square is meant to represent 1 square foot. So I always like to write that. And, just to let you know, it's true. It's supposed to represent 1 foot. I'm just going to sketch out this little drawing onto a bigger paper and use a ruler to help me keep the line straight. And I'm gonna kind of jump back and forth because there's gonna be a lot of information in this video, so I'm not gonna leave in me doing a lot of the drawing. Okay, now I am done with the overall layout of my main garden block. I have some other little areas that I usually plant stuff in, but they're not really that big of a deal for me, and it's really kind of like I'm working with other people to kind of determine what they want and what I want in the space. It's kind of going to be like a little project in of itself, so I'm gonna leave those out for this. And on this design, I don't include things like pots or like my other garden ply I've rented. This is just going to be for my main plot. I tend to think that things I put in pots and stuff you already know you're going to put usually like 1 or 2 species in a pot, and you're going to kind of leave them there for the whole summer. So it's not really, in my opinion, worth accounting for. Planting plants in pots to me is more spontaneous. It's more of a spontaneous thing. If you do a pot garden, and that sounds funny, but a pot garden, it's obviously you can still use this method and plan out, oh, we're gonna have a 30-gallon fabric pot full of blueberries or tomatoes or whatever, and that works for you. But for me, it's a smaller part of the garden, so obviously I'm gonna allocate a smaller part of effort towards it, though it is good habit or practice to kind of account for that stuff if you're not changing out the soil every year. So what I like to look at next is my state's, they have the Ag Extension Office gives out a vegetable kind of chart, and it gives you a rough idea of when you can plant stuff. The USDA actually just updated the growing zones or hardiness zones within a lot of the United States or lower 48. My area didn't really change much with the growing zone or season, but I know some changed a little bit. So go refresh on that, because I know maybe you could be growing stuff a little bit earlier, maybe you could be growing stuff a little bit later, and you could factor that into your new growing design or plan. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a big deal for me. Everything's the same, but this is super helpful in knowing when you can plant things instead of going through each pack and writing it down. Oh, I need to plant this, XYZ, I need to plant this, plant this. Now that you have this, you're gonna replicate this about 3 or 4 times. So I like to do one for, let me see if I have an example. Well, I misplaced my example. It's somewhere in my files. Let's say, referencing the previous garden, I like to break it up into early spring, before the last frost, warm season plants, and then kind of like a late season. So you're breaking it up into 2 or 3 segments of the growing season. And this helps you be more productive in the garden. It helps you have a continuous harvest, or always have things growing in space rather than leaving empty patches or letting stuff just sit in there all year. Obviously there's a little bit of gray area, because according to this, it says that carrots are going to be planted in April, which is true, but I'd argue you could plant them earlier than that, because I had carrots surviving well past the frost. They're pretty cold hardy, but I'd say you could plant those really almost in March, and in the right area. I've also had carrots grow all year till the end, from before the last frost to the first frost, and I ate them. They tasted fine. Some of them were sweet, some of them were a little bit more bitter, but overall most of them were sweet. And they were pretty big carrots too. They were probably about 6-7 inches. And so that was actually my first year planting successful carrots. But anyways, you understand what I'm trying to say, is that a lot of these crops you kind of learn based off of experience, and you can play around. And this is really not a set rule in stone. This is just a recommendation, or what things that generally work, like it's a safety net. So, you'll have people nowadays say, oh, you should be planting broccoli and cauliflower and all these brassicas in March. And I did that and they didn't come up. So I think you need to start them earlier. Like I said, it's about location, where you're planting them, soil quality, random weather events, and then just experience with these plants. So do take this with a grain of salt. And this is for zone 6B. So if you're in California, somewhere that's colder, maybe in Minnesota, if you're in Florida, this does not apply to you. Do not look at this as a guide on how to design your garden. You're gonna have to do the research on your own. This is really just meant to show you a rough idea of how to go about designing your garden. Because once you get this down, it's a piece of cake. It shouldn't take you more than an hour or two of work if you're slow like me, but a lot of people can do this within 30 minutes and have their garden done. But I'm taking my time because I want to show you I want to give you a good resource if you're curious or you don't know how to do this on your own. I just want to show you that it's not difficult, and gardening doesn't have to be super complex if you want to really increase your yield. So I'm gonna draw this out a few more times to give an accurate reading for every, like I said, the early spring, after the last frost, and then late season, as you'll see, kind of around July. But usually for me, I'm not really planning a lot of things towards the end of the growing season. Usually I get burnt out, or I'm not really wanting a whole bunch of more. I don't want to plant more carrots, or I don't want to plant more broccoli, or not broccoli, but I don't want to plant more small things that I don't really care for anyways. I'm really focused on the main crops, so I'm gonna let them keep growing. But like I said, I'm gonna finish up this and I'll let you know when I get back. Okay, so now I've gotten all three of the plans drawn out. I realized I made a mistake and I forgot to add in the 3 feet here to the overall length, so that's why this box is extended. And this one I actually messed up and thought it was extra because I did account for it originally, but there's already stuff growing there anyway, so I can't really I'm not gonna plant anything in it initially, really, so I'll just leave that X'd out. But what I wanna do is I wanna start and I wanna look at what you can plant in March and April. So I don't know if you guys can see it, but in my zone you can grow cabbage, broccoli, endive, cauliflower, lettuce, potatoes, radish, onions, onion sets, peas, spinach, turnips, and more. But those are the basic ones that people usually grow. I know for sure I'll be doing most likely lettuce, potatoes, peas, onions, and spinach, and maybe some carrots or cauliflower and broccoli, depending on what I want to plant. But I'm gonna write that out over here. So we're gonna say, I'm trying to remember what seeds I have. So I don't have cauliflower, so obviously we're not gonna grow cauliflower. So we're gonna do broccoli. I think I have some Waltham. I have some Chinese cabbage, which I'll need to check and make sure I can grow that this early, but I assume you can. So cabbage. I have the Paris head romaine, so lettuce, potatoes, which I'll grow in bags, so I'll put a little asterisk near there. And then onions and spinach and peas. And that's all I really want to grow out here. And these all start here, so you can factor in all this and keep in mind what you really need to be focusing on. I know right now I have green onion growing. Like I said, it's in this little X area, and then I have garlic planted from last fall. I didn't do a good job of marking out where I had that planted, but it's okay. I have a rough idea, so it'll make itself more apparent as they start popping up. But I'm starting to see signs that they're coming to life. So it's somewhere over here. So I have to plan around that. And then I'm also going to have to account for, I'll probably grow kale and or collard greens, which, yeah, those you really only need a plant. So I'm right next to it. I'm gonna write about 2 plants approximately, because that's a lot. That's plenty for me. And these, you really want to plant these when the bugs aren't out, because the cabbage moth will destroy your brassicas. So a way around that is to plant early, and also you can cover it up with insect netting, which does help because they come in as those little white moths, and then all of a sudden now you got 30, or in extreme cases, like 20 or 30 caterpillars eating your leaves. And so those are things to consider for cabbage and broccoli as well. But everything else should be pretty easy and self-explanatory. I don't like to plant in this corn because corn uses a lot of nitrogen, even with the Three Sisters method. So I'm not planting anything in my Three Sisters plot. You could probably get away with putting some stuff on the edge if you want to do onions or something on the ground, but I don't really want to do that. Right now, I'm also thinking about, in this raised bed I have back here, planting some onions, just doing all onions here. And right here there's a chain fence. I don't know if you've seen it in my other videos, but I'm really thinking about just putting some peas in there along some of these edges and just letting them grow, and maybe putting some more trellises and just trying to put some more nitrogen back in the ground. I know it's not that much. It's probably about 10 to 20% max of what the plant's actually generating with its nitrogen fixation, but still it's better than nothing. So the garlic's already planted, so I might actually go out and remeasure that now that they're popping up. But if I remember correctly, it's about 3 or 4 feet from the top, and it stretches out about, let's just be generous and give 10 feet. So I'm not gonna plant anything in this vicinity, so I'm gonna write garlic. And I should actually be doing this with a pencil, because if that's incorrect, I'll have to go back and redo all this and add stuff, and I don't really want to erase. Yeah, so I planted, I wish I had my actual full list here, because I got lost somewhere along the way. But I recall I had kale and collard greens planted actually right next to the garlic. So right about, let's say here, I had 2, and then I had somewhere down here a few more kale, like probably about 3. I actually had 2 in each plot. So if there was a cluster, imagine a few of the collard greens and kales. So obviously I'm gonna try to avoid that. I planted peas along this edge for about here. So I got some peas last year. It's actually some of the seeds I saved. And so I'm gonna try to avoid that and maybe put peas somewhere in the middle right here. So, and they really only take up a foot, and they'll just climb up these poles, these trellises and poles, and eventually you can eat these snow peas you eat them fresh, or you can let them go to seed and dry on the vine, but those will take up more space, and they'll be on they'll be taking up space longer than what they're saying on this list. So if we're wanting to do broccoli, cabbage, and all that, I'm gonna consider growing broccoli and cabbage on this strip. And what you need to consider is, I like to pull out my seed pack and get in what they need for that variety. But if you just want a general planting, my list is good. It'll say for broccoli, it'll say the optimum temperature, the depth, the average spacing within a row and between rows. I lost my space, but yep, 36, and that they're frost hardy, which is all you need to know. So next to here, you can write, I lost my pen. You can write, you know, for broccoli, they need 18 to 24 inches. And then I like to say within row, and then between. So 18 and 24, and then 36. And you have to label that. And you can just go down the list. Okay, and now I'm going to block this out and I'm gonna show you what it looks like after. Okay, so I ended up not finding my old plans, which is a little bit concerning. They must have got lost while I was reorganizing. I did finish the early season gardening plan. This is just for, like I said, between March and May. A lot of this stuff you can actually interplant into the warmer season, but I just want to get kind of like a crude outline. Yeah, so I'm actually gonna make a quick change right here, and just because I can. So in the permaculture world, there's kind of, I can't remember the exact terminology, but the idea is that you should be breaking up your garden space into zones. Zone 1 being, or zone 0 being like your home. Zone 1 being places you walk past frequently. And then obviously from 2, 3, 4, 5, 5's like you don't touch. It's wild, it's kind of like brush, weeds, like imagine like a forest pretty much. So I kind of try to translate that into my garden plan, because you don't want, if you're going to be picking or cutting lettuce heads or grabbing spinach every day for dinner, you don't want to plant it all the way at the end of your backyard or garden, because let's be real, you're not going to really want to go out there and get it. I have my compost pile kind of way back here, which I call my zone 3 or 4, and I don't, sometimes I kind of don't want to go dump my compost. It seems like a chore. So just keep that in perspective. I put things that I was going to, things that I want to guard or baby closer, and things that I'm going to visit a lot closer as well. So up here I have peas, but the peas are really just going to be growing on this fence. They're not really going to be taking up that much room, nor that much sun, in my opinion. Behind it I have cilantro, an herb, carrots just to take up a little bit of space, and carrots don't really take up any space, in my opinion. You can get by with, kind of just sticking them here, there, wherever. And do know that even though you make this plan, some people stick by the plan 100%. Realistically, something's always going to deviate from the plan. Something's going to fail, something's going to pop up and volunteer, and you realize, oh, I don't really want to pull that. Just remember that. It's not always going to be according to plan, and you can update it as you go along. That's why I recommend using pencil if you are willing to make it look a little bit unprofessional, but you can still color coordinate and do all that, but just keep that in mind. And as you go down, you can see like the spinach, carrots, spinach, lettuce, carrots in the back behind lettuce. You can actually interplant carrots, in my opinion, in between the rows. So this is not accurate in how you would actually plant it. Peas need trellises, but I'm planting this just to put some nitrogen back in the ground, and I'm gonna cut a lot of this stuff out. And this is gonna be, my tomatoes. I'm gonna plant tomatoes here, some San Marzanos. And you'll see in the future, or in the next plan, I'm just gonna kind of speed this up. I regret, like I said, I wanted to plant the garlic and baby it, but I regret not putting it further back, because now it takes up a huge space that gets pretty good sun, and it's gonna be stuck. Garlic's gonna be growing here the whole season, until like September or November, until the fall. So this spot I'm leaving blank. I just want the garlic to do their thing. As we go further, I got more lettuce and peas. I'm trying out 2 types of lettuce. So I said the Paris Head Island, but I also am gonna grow a Merlot lettuce, which it's just like a red, dark kind of lettuce. It's supposed to be cut and come again. I've never grown it. It was it was a Baker Creek free seed, and I just want to try it because why not? I could technically grow it indoors, but might as well. And then I'm gonna try out some cabbage, some Napa style cabbage called the Hilton variety that I also got from Baker Creek. Some broccoli, I think it's just Waltham, and then some more carrots, broccoli, and you will be able to interplant some more carrots into this. Like I said, it's just an idea. I'm also putting some kale. I previously grew kale all along this, so I'm trying to avoid putting any more brassicas over there and kind of replenish that with some nitrogen fixers. You could, if you wanted to, you could put green onion. I still have green onion growing over here that survived the winter. And I'm also growing in a pot some Egyptian walking onions. So you could technically put Egyptian walking onions all over and get a perennial onion, and you can cut the chives or the tops off of that, and you can use it just like a green onion. I don't really feel the need to plant green onions anymore, but you can plant them everywhere kind of. You could also put onions just kind of anywhere you have space, but I want to do an experiment and just plant some in a designated space that gets pretty good sun. I'm cutting down some mulberry tree that's growing over this, and I'm gonna experiment and see if they'll grow here. Last year I planted them and they weren't doing so good, so I'm gonna try to plant these like a few weeks earlier and see if they'll do okay. I could only get bulbs like this big for my onions, but if these fail, I'm just gonna try, and I'm gonna try some Walla onions or something else. But yeah, this is pretty simple. Like I said, I'm not growing anything here. I just want it to rest and decompose. I'm adding more compost and mulch because I had an issue with weeds and Bermuda grass growing, as everyone does. Plus, like I said, I'm saving this for my 3 sisters, though you could probably get away with planting some, some stuff along the edges like carrots or something, and it wouldn't really affect it, but I'm not really dying to increase my carrot yield. Some people are, I'm not. But yeah, so you get the basics of it. It doesn't have to be complex. You can get it to look pretty nice, even if you're like me and have chicken scratch. It just takes the time to do it, and it helps. You can even go more analytical than this and put all the varieties you have and all that, but you don't really need to, in my opinion. Just garden, man. You'll figure out the generalities and the general rules with your climate and your growing situation as you just get used to it. So don't overthink it. But yeah, I'll move on to the next few months and I'll show you what I got in plan. Okay, here's the meat and potatoes of the warm season growing. So as you can see, the 3 Sisters area is filled out. It doesn't really seem to make much sense for most people, so I'll explain it. The squares represent corn. I'm growing Hopi blue corn again, and I want to keep my seed as pure as possible, so I don't plant any other variety of corn, not even sweet corn. And then the circles represent squash or pumpkins that I'm gonna plant. I can't decide whether or not I should grow only butternut squash, or if I should grow the Jardale pumpkin I have, or if I should just do zucchini, even though zucchini's not really going to climb around, or if I should just grow cucumbers for pickles since I'm growing dill. One change I made was I took out the peas here and I'm going to be adding dill, and then I also added some tomato, some space for some tomato. And I like to plant marigold and basil around my tomatoes to help keep pests away. I also am still going to be interplanting carrots around them, and I'm going to be planting peppers, probably jalapenos over here, and some tomatillos. I'm still planning on, once the cabbage and broccoli get developed, that they're still going to be here. And after they're gone, I realize I probably won't even need the second map, because the only thing that's really going to change is the cabbage and broccoli leaving. In their place, I'll probably put some type of legume or bean, just because I want to put some more nitrogen in that ground and kind of get some diversity. Technically, I could just re-sow broccoli and cabbage, but what's the point if you're not going to add compost? You're not going to get the best yield in the long term. So, and then I'm leaving the peas back here so they can dry and go to seed. I'm going to plant okra, since okra will probably outgrow the peas, and I don't really care for these green onions. They're probably just going to bolt and go to seed by then. And I'll still have the Egyptian walking onions doing their thing. Yellow onions are going to be in the ground still, so I'm not touching them. And from my experience, these guys should be okay. I will mention that I do plan on covering all this stuff with insect mesh this year, just to help keep the cabbage moths off there. That's the basic outline for mine. Like I said, it doesn't have to be super complex, and there's even more room for interplanting if you want it. I'm not gonna go and do the late season because it's pretty much gonna look exactly the same, with the only difference being that there's gonna be beans here, and it's really it. And I could plant lettuce here if I wanted to, but it's unlikely. I usually get pretty sick of lettuce after the first few months, and it is nice to be able to plant spinach and all that, but some of the other things I'm gonna be growing, you could eat the greens like spinach, and they last all season. I'm gonna be planting amaranth, and yeah, I think amaranth is the one you can eat the leaves from, but I'm gonna be planting back here and just growing that for grain. So keep in mind you can eat the leaves for that, and it's pretty hardy. And then I forgot to mention on the Three Sisters, there's beans. You can interplant that with beans. I'll put a link to my previous video. It's not the best video, but it definitely kind of goes over the basics and the benefits of the interplanting method. I also wrote a blog on the topic, which I felt was very informative for those who have no real background with the subject. But yeah, I have, like I said, another garden plot. I'm going to be growing a different variety of corn, and I have some relatives that grow food as well, so I'm going to be trying to see what I can grow here or there just to save some seeds. But I'm also growing a lot more varieties in pots, so that's always an option if you want to have a little bit of flexibility and you're running out of space. Just consider having a pot garden. And I'm not saying grow marijuana, I know that sounds funny, but you can plant a lot of stuff in 5, 10, 20 gallon pots, and you can even plant some perennial plants in a 20, 30 gallon pot. So do take note. I hope I taught some of you guys some basics on garden design. It does not have to be that complex. I do have some books that if you're interested, I made a video about the 2 books that really helped me when I took my permaculture class. It was actually the required reading, but it completely changed the way I looked at annual gardening. And with experience, you'll kind of just figure out what works for you and what you really like to eat and what you don't like to eat, because I know personally for me, the idea of growing something is more appealing than actually eating it. Like, I used to grow radishes every year, but I never ate the radishes. Why am I growing radishes? It's a waste of space, waste of energy, waste of time. So cut them out of my garden plan this year, and now I got kale taking their place, where I'm growing all onion because everyone loves onions. I use them in my cooking every week. So yeah, just think about that next time if you're just designing your garden plan for the first time, and let me know if you have any success or if you have any questions. I'll gladly answer. Thanks for watching.